Hello there. Thanks for taking the time and having a beer with me by the fire. And if you clicked on this video, you want to learn a little bit more about fly fishing. Just a quick background, because you're going to learn a lot in this video. I've been fly fishing for almost 40 years, so I've got probably 200 different videos on my channel that talks about different techniques and different ways that I've discovered that'll help you catch more fish. So sit back, grab a beer, and join me in this little video session. Instead of you trying to go find all of these different tips and tricks on catching more fish while fly fishing, I thought, you know what? We're gonna have a beer together. I'm gonna put them all in a row and we'll just watch them together. So sit back and enjoy several different tutorials in a row. And I just spilled my beer. Cheers. Hey guys, thanks for tuning into my channel. I am at my not-so-secret lake today, and we're going to talk a little bit about stillwater tactics. Oh, and be sure to stick to the end of the video because I'm going to give you a fly fishing pro tip when fishing stillwater, lakes, big bodies of water, small bodies of water. What are my top 3 retrieves when fishing stillwater? The first one, and the most common that I use, I call a finger roll. Some people call it a figure 8, but it's when you slowly bring the line back into your reel or into your float tube or into your boat or wherever you might be fishing. But it's generally done with one hand, and it's a very slow finger roll back. And what you're doing is you're just giving the fly a little bit of action, whether it's chironomid fishing, or you might have a leech under an indicator, or perhaps it's even a streamer. Sometimes slower is better, and this finger roll, figure 8 type of retrieve can be very effective, especially when fishing chironomids or San Juan worms under an indicator. Oh my God, that was a super hard takedown. Nice fish. Sweet. The next is more typical. It is more of a fast strip. And you can do variations of speed when you're stripping in, but it's generally a 6 to 8 inch pull back into you and just stripping in, whether it's a streamer or sometimes it can be a nymph or it can be a leech pattern that you use this particular technique. Oh, there we go. And finally, there's the really slow strip. Sometimes you can sit in a float tube or a boat and just pull it back very slowly, and fish will be attracted to that. Or if you're in a float tube, you can cast it out and just slowly troll it along. There we go. Fish on. Oh, geez. Beautiful fish. Sweet. Wow, so spotted up. And that's the third different retrieve that is most commonly found on lakes. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about, the pro tip that everyone should do, is when you're fishing lakes, fish both the edges and the middle. A lot of people overlook the edge of the lake. A lot of times that's where the fish are hanging out. Nice fish. There we go. Fish on. I call that. Oh, that is a double. Nice. Oh yeah, he's a nice slap. Wow. Nice fish. Look at that guy. Gotta love barbless hooks. This came right out. So fish the middle, but also target the edges when fishing lakes. All right. Hope that helps you catch more fish. Let's do this. Fish on. Oh, you're back. Seriously though, those retrieves, if you're fishing lakes and stillwater, next time you're out there, if you're not doing much with your fly, try those 3 different retrieves. I know you will catch more fish if you do this technique. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's a good fish. Hello there. Thank you for taking the time to click on this video. I do appreciate it. And you clicked on this video because you want to learn a little bit about streamer fishing. Now, there's a ton to know, right? So I'm going to try to really boil it down to the basics. Be sure to stick to the end of the video as well, because I'm going to give you the #1 reason why you need to fish streamers, period. So what are streamers? Streamers imitate a lot of times bait fish, right? So fish that are predatory are either going to eat these smaller fish, or they might get pissed off that somebody else is in their turf and strike at it. So it could be those two reasons why they might eat a streamer, but streamers can be super, super effective. Now, there are a ton of different streamers out there, and a lot of them are tied for the fishermen, right? Because they look good, they look fishy, so you buy them. But really what I found that there's a handful of streamers that work on a consistent basis, either for trout or for brown trout. And generally they're a natural color, right? Olive, green, tan, white, yellow sometimes could be super effective. But I try to stay away from some of the other crazy stuff that's out there in streamers just because, I don't know, I really do believe that they are tied more for the fishermen. You might be able to catch a fish on one of those really brightly colored crazy streamers, but I stick to these few types of streamers like the sculpin pattern from Red's Flies because they're just effective and they consistently catch fish. So don't get too enamored by all the colors that you find when you do see a streamer. Stick to some of the natural colors and you'll have a lot more luck. So how do you fish a streamer? There are a couple ways you can fish a streamer. One is that you just cast it across the river and you let it swing back around. You always want to fish it back in when you're doing something like that, and you want to also continue to mend your line so that you have a straight line to the fly. Too big of a bend in the line, it's going to be a lot harder to set the hook on a fish and keep them on because you're creating a lot of slack. So be sure you're doing a lot of mending. Also, walk the fly out. Don't cast all the way across the river. Cast short, walk it out, and then just keep covering the entire river. You'll find that you'll have a lot more success if you do that. Sometimes I just let it swing and let the marabou just, wave inside the water and just all that action that's happening, especially with these articulated flies. Or I'll put a little strip action on. And don't be afraid to vary your stripping as well, right? Let it come down. Maybe it's a little bit of a wiggle that you're putting on the fly. Maybe you're stripping it in and stopping and stripping it in. Maybe it's a long strip. The point is you want to put a lot of variation on this fly. Movement is king when fishing streamers. You just don't want to have just a quiet swing without any real action on it. You might catch a fish, but you're going to be far more likely if you're putting some movement, right? Because these are small bait fish that are skittish and want to swim away if a big fish is coming at them. So you do want to put a little action on it. Swinging is one way. I love casting upstream. The upstream cast can be so effective when fishing streamers. So be sure to swing it and also do the upstream cast, because sometimes you'll catch a fish even though you've been swinging a hole for an hour. You do an upstream cast and that variation in presentation, the fish is going to strike it. Oh, look at that! Look at that! There it is, it's chasing it. He's chasing it! Holy shit. Oh, he broke me off! Oh, no. So be sure to do a lot of different techniques. There's not just one. You will find success if you vary it up. And finally, why do you want to fish streamers? Because they work. And a lot of times they are the big fish fly. Fish can be predatory, right? Even the smaller ones can be, but a lot of times the bigger ones are. I've caught a lot of big brown trout, a lot of big rainbow trout using streamers because they're just a big fish fly. So you want to do that. Even if you are dry fly fishing on any given day, have another setup with a streamer and you might find you might pick up a trophy-sized trout by running the streamer to that same hole you caught a few fish on the dries. So there you go. That is why you want to fish streamers, and I hope this helps you a little bit the next time you're out there. Follow some of these techniques, do a little experimenting, and I'm fairly certain you'll find success using streamers. Oh, and be sure to stick to the end of the video because I have got a special project that involves you, and you may want to be involved in this, so be sure to stick to the end of the video. Hey there. Thanks for tuning into my channel. I do appreciate it. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about casting streamers and casting big nymph setups like I have on here. Right, I've got two nymphs. I've got a main nymph and a dropper and an indicator. If you're new to fly fishing, that is not easy to cast. Right, so I want to give you a tip on how to better cast a setup like this. And it's called water loading. So what water loading is essentially, if you know what false casting is, right? False casting is when you go back and forth and then you finally present your fly or your line. A lot of times if you do that type of casting with this type of setup, it's going to be a tangled mess by the time you deliver it to the water. So you want to avoid false casting these setups, especially if you're new to fly fishing, because you have to wait till everything extends out behind you before bringing it forward. Otherwise, you'll just wind up with a great big spaghetti mess in front of you. And we all know how that feels. So do something called water loading. If you do water loading to where you cast, you let everything fall in the water, then you get a nice tight line, pick it up again, and cast again. You're not doing any type of false casting at all, setting up or casting setups like this. So it really makes a big difference when casting these double nymph indicator setups. It also works for heavy streamers, right? If you're casting big heavy streamers and you're false casting, a lot of times if you bring that rod too quickly forward, you're gonna hear a snap, and that's your fly snapping off the fly line because you basically bullwhipped it behind you because you started bringing your rod forward too soon and created that whip snapping sound that breaks your fly off. So do some water loading when you're fishing streamers and you're gonna have a much better result. So I hope those 2 tips help you if you're new to fly fishing and you're fishing double nymph setups or big old streamers. I hope that helps you the next time. And hey, if you need a little help with your fly fishing cast, I put together a tutorial right here, and I think I've got the right side. It may be over here, one of these. Maybe I'll put 2 videos up there. These videos will help you cast your fly rod just a little bit better. Really easy to understand, simple techniques that you can put to use yourself to help cast that fly line just a little bit further. All right, everybody, until the next time, fish on. Just a reminder, special project that involves you, so be sure to stick to the end of this video. We'll talk about it. Hello there. Thanks for tuning into my channel. Today, we're going to talk about a tactic that you need to do the next time you're out there fishing stillwater. So I'm out here and fishing today. I'm using indicators, and we're varying up what's below, right? Right now, I've got a leech with a mop fly, but this will work if you have really a nymph or a chironomid or just a chironomid, San Juan worm. Doesn't matter what's below the indicator. If you do this tactic, it is deadly effective. All right, so what it is when you're fishing an indicator, typically, if you go way back into your youth, right, where you're fishing bobbers, you just let it sit and wait for it to go down. With fly fishing, you want to put a little action on the fly. A lot of times I use the figure 8 or finger roll just to put a little action on the fly, and each time you move it just a little bit, boom, the fish take it. This time I just gave the fly a little pop. Oh, look at that big fish over there. Let's see if I can get him. Where the wind comes a big gust of wind. Oh, he's swimming right at me. Oh, I don't know. I have got the magic fly. Maybe my fish will bring some fish over to your indicator. Yeah, the mop again. He's a pretty fish. Look at this guy. Oh, he's probably 4 pounds. Wow. So be sure to do just a little bit of action using your hand, using your fingers, do the finger roll on that indicator, and you will catch more fish, just like this one. Oh. That's a good fish. Yeah, this is a good little spot right here in our secret lake. Look at this fish. Jeez. Oh, man. He's not happy. Pretty fish. That guy just calmed down for just a hot second. That's a pretty fish. All right, I hope that technique helps you the next time you're out fly fishing to catch a few more fish. Great stillwater tactic. So I have to tell you, that technique works. Do that and you will catch more fish. I promise you. Hello there. Thanks for taking the time to click on this video. And if you're new to fly fishing, I've got a pro tip for you. Now, typically, traditional fishing, you're using pretty heavy line, right? So if you catch a big fish, release it, throw it back out there, no big deal. With fly fishing, a lot of times you're using 5X, maybe even 6X or lighter, God forbid. I hate using anything lighter than 5. But if you catch a big fish, like this one right here. Come on. Oh my God, yeah. Holy, big fish. Oh my God. Oh, holy smokes. Look at the size of that fish. Oh, holy crap. It's time to retie. Just take a minute, retie your fly. Otherwise, the worst potential thing could happen, right? The next big fish breaks it off because you got a little nick in your line. So when you're using super light tippet like this, it's super important to always keep that line as perfect as possible, the knot as perfect as possible. And if you catch a really big toothy fish, retie it, you won't regret it. Hello there. Thanks for tuning into my channel. I do appreciate it. Well, while we're on the river today, I thought I'd give you a couple of fly fishing tips, especially if you're new to fly fishing. I've had a lot of people on the channel ask me some specific questions and I'm going to answer them. One, here's a kind of a simple thing to do, right? You notice how I'm carrying my fly rod? I'm carrying it pointing backwards. Now, you can't always carry it like this, especially if you're going through a lot of heavy brush. You're going to need to be able to see where the rod is. But typically, when you're walking the side of a river, carry the fly rod pointing backwards. And why that's important is because if you were to trip and fall, your rod is not falling forward and you're not breaking rods. You're far less likely to break a fly rod if you're carrying it behind you while walking a river. So that's a tip that a lot of people have learned the hard way. So if you're not in heavy brush and you're walking the side of the river or you're walking down a trail that doesn't have a lot of heavy brush, carry your fly rod backwards and you're gonna have a far better result if, God forbid, you're to trip. So just a fly fishing tip for you if you're new to fly fishing. Hey guys, thanks for tuning into my channel. I've got 2 reasons why you should use indicators and balanced leeches. This is just a deadly way to present a balanced leech. So, reason number 1. All right, I'm changing the top fly to this little balanced leech. I think maybe smaller might be better. Let's see if this works. There we go. Fish on. Oh, this is a big one. Oh, big head shake. Yes. Oh, yeah. This is a freaking huge fish. Oh my God. Holy crap, this thing is gigantic. Oh, almost too big for the net. Holy crap. What a chunk. All right, reason number 2. There we go. Fish on. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Head up. Oh, yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God. Look at this shot. This fish. Oh, and there it goes. All right, if that doesn't convince you, you need to fish it this way. It's a very effective way to present balanced leeches in lakes because you're going to catch some tank monster trout. There it is, your fly fishing pro tip of the day. All right, everybody, till the next time, fish on. Now, if that isn't proof that that technique works, I don't know what is, because that was a huge fish. And I like to think it's because I did that allowed me to catch something that big. Today, we're gonna talk about sink tips. There are probably 8,675,309 sink tips to choose from. How do you decide? Well, I'm going to make it really easy in this video for you to decide what you should do related to sink tips. And this is what's worked for me over all the years that I've fly fished. And please be sure to stick to the end of the video because I'm going to tell you a little known fact about fishing sink tips. So there are really two types of sink tips that work really well for me. One is the type that you attach to a floating line. Honestly, there are even numerous types of those. I have one sink tip that does anything and everything I want it to do when it comes to using a floating line and this sink tip attachment. So the sink tip that I use is a fast sink tip. Goes right on the end of your floating line, and then you tie a tapered leader on the end of that and choose whatever fly you'd like. When it comes to sink tips, for me, I don't get stuck in the weeds with all these different types of grains and how fast they sink and how slow they sink, whether they're a fast sink or whether they're an intermediate. I just go with a fast sink tip, and if I want it to sink deeper, I just wait a little bit longer. If I don't want it to sink very deep, well then as soon as I cast it out, I start stripping it back in. So what I try to do is I try not to get stuck trying to determine which type I need. I have just this one type and I vary my presentation based off of where I'm fishing. And that's worked really well for me when fishing these type of sink tips. So the second option you could go with is having a fly reel that has exclusively sinking line. And what that consists of is a full sinking head, and it's generally an intermediate body. If I'm really going down deep for fish and I want to have an easier casting experience, I use my fly reel that has a full sinking line. And that really does well for me. The one that I have on my Orvis 8-9 reel is a full sink, fast sink. And just like the ones that I put on the fly line, I just vary my presentation based off of the depth of where I'm fishing. The lake right behind me is about 40 feet deep. So if I'm fishing this lake, I'm just gonna wait longer after casting it to let that thing sink down and then retrieve it back. If I wanna see if the fish are higher up in the water column, I'm gonna cast it out and I may not wait at all. And I'll start stripping that thing back, knowing that it's gonna be a couple of feet below the surface. So don't get stuck in the weeds when it comes to trying to pick the right sink tip. Just pick one that works well for you, works for your setup, and vary your retrieve based off of the depth of the water and where the fish might be eating in the water column. And that's really it. Fish on. So the one thing that you should know about sink tips is they are pretty easy to cast. And I found that if you're in tight spots, you can conduct a roll cast very easy with a sink tip. In fact, it's almost easier to roll cast a sink tip than a floating line. Super easy. You just wait until that sinking head is nearly to the end of the rod and you have about a rod length of line beyond the tip of your fly rod, and you just bring it up to about 1 o'clock, create that nice D loop in the line and shoot that nice and smooth out in a nice roll cast. Sinking lines really do roll cast nicely, and it's an easier way to get that setup out there instead of trying to hold all of that heavy line in the air. You can do it, you just have to be more deliberate and spend a lot more time with technique and waiting for that line to fully extend behind you when you're casting a full sink line. If you have one of the sink tips on a floating line, it can get what I describe as kind of rubber bandish. It can be tough to cast. But if you do water loading, let that line fall onto the water, bringing it back, and when just about you're right about to where the sink tip is, bring that up, lay it down. Now bring it up again, lay it down. Then if you need to do one more cast, bring it up and lay it down. And that's called water loading. It's very tough to false cast one of those sink tips that are attached to your floating line because it's just like a rubber band. So those would be your two tips when casting sink tips. All right, well, I hope this helps you choose a sink tip next time you're out there. Thanks for tuning in. Until the next time, fish on. All right, be sure to stick with me to the end of the video here because I'm going to provide you a chart that'll answer every single question you've ever had regarding poundage and diameter of every size of tapered leader and tippet available to you. All right, let's get started with the conversation. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another video. I do appreciate it. And hey, we're going to talk today about tapered leaders and tippet. And I'm going to boil it down to just the basics that you need in your fly bag. Because when you go into the fly shop or you look online, there is a billion different types, right? Different lengths, different sizes, different diameters, different X's, different whatever, right? I'm going to show you exactly what I've used over the years and why I now just basically have these 4 different size tapered leaders and these 4 different sizes of tippet when I am freshwater fishing. Okay, let's talk tapered leaders. So the first one I'm going to show you is a 5X tapered leader. You want to have this in your bag in case you are fly fishing a place that's been fished a ton, the fish are a little bit leader shy, or if you have to use really small flies. You're going to want to have 5X tapered leaders in your bag for those reasons. Next, and the most commonly used, is 4X. It has enough punch power to where you can set the hook pretty hard on those fish and not worry about a break off. And it's a small enough diameter that most flies will fit on this particular line. However, if you are fishing larger size streamers or larger size dry flies, you want to level up to 3X. Now, I love fishing 3X because it just gives you that little bit of safety, right? You just feel a little bit better about using a heavier fly line when you're fishing for larger fish. Generally in the summertime or in the fall when the fish are really eating and they're voracious, doesn't matter what size tippet that you have or what size tapered leader you're using, the fish are going to eat it. This is when you use 3X. So larger patterns, it also doesn't twist as much. You will notice that if you put a fly like this on 4X, it is going to twist and twist and twist, and it's just going to make a big mess out of your line. So if you're fishing flies like that, use a 3X. You're going to have a much better experience when fishing these larger flies. Now let's just say you want to fish streamers. So I've got a box of streamers right here. Now for this, generally, you can do 3X, and I have done 3X in the past. But if I know these fish are just targeting these bigger flies, a lot of times you can use 1X, right, and get away with that. If you're swinging streamers and these fish are just, I mean, they don't care, right? If it's in front of them, they're going to attack it. You can use 1X, and now you know it's going to take a really big toothy fish to break you off. The other thing you might notice on these is I use Rio Power Flex. Now, there are a lot of other different leaders, tapered leaders out there that you can use. I prefer this brand just because I trust them, right? I haven't lost fish because of failures. The Power Flex just has a little bit extra punch for when you want to set the hook, and they're more resistant for those toothy fish that might wrap up in their mouth. This is less likely to break with this Power Flex Plus. Now let's talk about tippet. So I have matched nearly every one of my tapered leaders with tippet. Because inevitably when you're tying flies and you're using 5X, you're going to want to have a roll of tippet to lengthen that when you start chopping into that 9-foot length. But I match all of my tapered leaders with the tippet material. And then there's one differentiator. There's one thing different. So as you can see here, I've got the 1X tapered leader and I've got the 2X, things are falling over here. I've got the 2X tippet. And this kind of allows best of both worlds, right? If I want to go with a really heavier line, I've got 1X. If I just want to scale down just a little bit for whatever reason, right? Maybe I'm thinking the fish might be a little bit leader shy. I can scale down with a 2X when I'm fly fishing big streamer patterns and just want to lessen the strength and lessen the diameter of the line a little bit. So that's why I don't match these two up when fly fishing. So don't get stuck in the weeds when it comes to, you know, what should I get? What poundage should I get? What diameter should I get? Should I get Power Flex? Should I get not the Power Flex? Should I get the regular? What do I get? If you go with a standard monofilament in these sizes, it's going to cover 90% of everything that you're going to do freshwater. All right, I'm going to butt in here for just a second. Now I know This is what's worked for me over the years, right? These size tippet and these size tapered leaders is really what has covered 90% of the freshwater fishing that I've done over the years. But if you really do want to get into the weeds and you want to know every size that's available, right down to the diameter and poundage and what they are actually designed for, I'm gonna leave a chart here for a few seconds that you can either take a screenshot, write it down, or just stare at it for a little while. All right, so those are the basics when it comes to tapered leaders and tippets, and I hope that you found it helpful. So in this video, we're going to talk about the basics that you need in your fly fishing bag if you're just starting out with fly fishing. So I'm going to cover really just the essentials, right? What do you need if you're just starting in fly fishing? What do you need to have in your bag? All right, let's be real. You don't need to have that much stuff in your gear bag if you're just starting out with fly fishing. That's a lot of stuff. And now I got to clean it all up. Yes, different day because I watched back the video and I talked way too much. Let's just talk about the basics you need in your fly bag. Oh hey, and be sure to stay to the end of the video because I'll take a little deeper dive in tapered leaders and tippet material and what you should have in your bag. But let's get started. All right, let's talk tippet. You're gonna need 5X, 4X, 3X, and 2X tippet. Let's get out the tapered leaders. You're gonna see a theme here. You're gonna wanna go 5X, 4X, 3X, and 1X tapered leader. So why do I have a 1X tapered leader and a 2X tippet? Because it allows me to have basically 2 for 1. I can size down to 2X if I want to, or I can keep it nice and stout at 1X. You'll notice that most of my tapered leaders and tippet are monofilament. You can get fluorocarbon. It is harder to break, but it doesn't stretch as much. But for what you're gonna be doing, 90% of freshwater fishing is gonna be with monofilament and you're gonna be just fine. So don't worry about getting fluorocarbon until you're further on down the line. You're gonna need some forceps. Don't get the ones without the cutters or you're gonna regret it. You're gonna need some indicators, big and small. You're gonna need some dry shake. You're gonna need some floatants. You're going to need a net. I'm assuming you already have a rod and reel because if you don't have that, it's really tough to fly fish. You're gonna need to put all this gear in something, right? You're gonna need a fly vest, a sling pack, a gear bag, or maybe it's a waterproof backpack. Am I going too fast? I don't want to slow it down because otherwise it gets really boring. So just either rewind it or write this stuff down. Lip balm and sunscreen. Protect yourself. You want to have that in your bag. You're gonna need a couple of fly boxes. I've got a whole lot in my bag. You're not gonna need that many. Just start off with a couple just to put all the flies in that you're inevitably gonna buy when you start fly fishing. And trust me, you'll probably have 15 within 5 years. And if you're getting along in years, like myself, you're gonna wanna have some Advil, or maybe some Tylenol, or maybe even some antacid. I carry that stuff wherever I go because you just never know when you're gonna need it. All right, squirrel moment. Check out this really cool hummingbird that's been hanging around this morning. Kind of cool. Sunglasses. You want to protect your eyes both from the sun and from flying hooks. You'll notice that I have a microfiber cloth. I use that for a lot of different things. You're gonna get your sunglasses kind of smudged up and messy when you're fishing. So you're gonna wanna have a microfiber cloth to take care of that. You're also gonna get some of your flies are gonna get soaked with water. And before using dry shake, which is also in my bag, I kind of dab out the water in each of the flies before putting in the dry shake. It just makes it last a little longer. All right, unless you're gonna wet weight it, you are gonna need waders. I prefer breathable, they're just more comfortable, and wading boots. I've had Sims, they've been great, and I've also had Corkers. Two great brands that you can't go wrong with. I know, James, I'm not gonna leave it out. I do have my cigar carrier as well, and a cigar with me every time I'm fishing, because that is a must for me. I wouldn't leave it out. Hey everybody, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of FlyFishDan. Today, we're gonna talk about netting a fish. Now, don't laugh, because we've all been with that guy that doesn't know how to net a fish, and that could be kind of nerve-wracking, especially if you got a really big fish on. So I have net a ton of fish in my life, and I'm gonna show you a few tips that I've used in netting fish. The first thing you wanna try to do is you wanna try to get the fish's head up before you net it, right? That is, fight him until he's tired, and then when his head is up and he's coming at you, that's when you make this real confident, quick but not too quick scooping motion, and try to lead the fish into the net head first, and then scoop it right up. Just like you're ladling out some soup, you want to scoop under the fish and bring it out. Now, I know that sounds really simple, but a lot of people, when they're netting fish, they'll either try to stab at it too quickly, come in from the side, come in backwards, hold the net in the water, waiting for the fish. You want to have the net at the ready. It can be touching the water, but away from the fish, because a lot of times if the fish see the net up close, they're going to take off running again. But you want to have a confident netting action. And really, that's what it boils down to, right? When you have confidence in netting a fish, it makes the biggest difference. And that's probably the biggest pointer that I can give you, is both with technique, but also net with confidence. Now, a lot of this netting style is for trout fishing. There is a way when you're fishing saltwater fishing and you're fishing for these giant salmon, you want to do kind of a suitcase, right? You do the same kind of thing, lead the fish in, but then you immediately pull the net up close and suitcase the fish in. And if you're a salmon fisher, you're gonna know exactly what I mean. But when you're fishing these smaller trout, and smaller meaning, you know, anywhere from 1 pound to 5 or 6 to 7 pounds, this is this type of technique you want to use when you're netting these fish. All right, so I hope that helps you not only catch more fish, but land more fish, so you can get that Instagram photo of your favorite fish. Hello there. Thank you for taking the time to click on this video. I do appreciate it. Today, we're gonna talk about prospecting. Nope, we're not talking about prospecting for gold.
There's gold in them dar hills.
Even though I kind of wish there might be some gold here. But anyway, we're prospecting for fish using prospecting flies. And my top prospecting fly is this great big trailing sculpin from Red's Flies. So what does that mean, right? Prospecting for fish. A lot of times if you're on a river or a stream and you don't see anything happening, right? There's no dry flies, there's no real evidence of fish activity, I tie on this great big sculpin and run it through the hole. And a lot of times I'll bring up a fish because I'm just kind of prospecting to see if there's anything in there willing to eat, right? Fish are predatory. You put a great big streamer in front of a fish that's just chilling in a nice hole, they're gonna come up and eat it most of the time. So the water's super clear. I've got a couple of setups. I got my 5-weight with my tried and true sculpin pattern, right? That's kind of my prospecting fly. It just, if there's predatory fish in here, they're gonna eat that. There we go. That's a good fish too. Wow. It's a big old, looks like a cutthroat. Holy crap. Oh, he's got some spunk, yeah. It's a beautiful cut. Wow. And then once you figure out there's fish and they're actively eating, then maybe you can tie on a dry and watch what else is happening right around you, whether you see some nymphs crawling around the rocks or whatever the case. But always start off with a prospecting fly. And that's what I did on this trip. And guess what? I caught a really nice fish because I was starting off with a prospect fly. And I also caught some fish on a dry fly because they were active and I figured, well, maybe they'll come up for that too. But That is what we call prospecting for fish and using, I like to use the trailing sculpin for prospecting for my fish. So, all right, there's your fly fishing tip of the trip. Hey guys, thanks for tuning into my channel. I'm fishing the Yakima River today, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to tell you about a specific retrieve that works very well when you're swinging streamers, and that is called a wiggle retrieve. I don't know if I've coined that or not, or if somebody else has called that, but you know, sometimes there's kind of like the jig retrieve, sometimes there's just kind of the fast strip or a slow strip or a slow pull, but what I have always called this is the wiggle retrieve. So a lot of times fish, when you're swinging a fly, they may not look at it, right, from just a strip standpoint or a swinging standpoint, but as soon as you put a little action on the tip and wiggle that tip just a little bit, all of a sudden the fish is just like, oh, they like how it looks in the water and they go after it. There was a day just a couple weeks ago I was fishing the Yakima. It was pretty slow, and I decided, you know, I'm just gonna try this little wiggle retrieve to see if I can entice a bite, and sure enough, first cast, the first time I did that, bam, it was fish on. And it was a really slow day too. There we go, fish on. Oh yes, nice. Oh, it's a good one too, Mark. Oh my gosh, nice. Try that the next time you're swinging streamers, and when it's right at the end of the swing and it's time to bring it in, fish it in, do the little wiggle retrieve, and you'll find that it'll work for you too. All right, well, I hope that helps you catch more fish. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of FlyFishDan. I'm up in one of my favorite lakes up in the mountains, Cascade Mountains, subalpine lake, and we're gonna do a little chironomid fishing. Now, if you Google chironomid fishing, it talks about it being a pleasant and aesthetically pleasing way to fish, and that's pretty accurate. We're gonna go into the details today of how to fish chironomid. So if you don't know what a chironomid is, and I'm not gonna get all scientific and technical with you, it is basically the stage of a fly that flies around when it's underwater. It's kind of a pupa, or kind of the beginning stages of that bug. So generally they come out of the mud and they come up through the water column, they hit the top of the water, they start to climb out of their shell and fly away. Typically when you're chironomid fishing, you're either fishing these chironomids down below the surface at any given level, and you have to experiment to find out where the fish are eating and where these chironomids might be sitting, or they may be on top. So there are chironomids that have kind of a floating head that brings it to the top, so it's like pre-emerging. So there's a couple of ways to do it, but today we're going to be under an indicator, and we're also going to be using another main fly with the chironomid as the dropper. So we'll talk a little about it, and I'll demonstrate, and hopefully we'll catch a fish with a chironomid. All right, let's go chironomid fishing. All right, guys, see you out in the lake. All right, we are on the lake fishing with chironomids. So let's take a look at my setup. So what I have on my rod is I have a large green snow cone chironomid, and I chose that mostly because that's what's worked in the past on this particular lake. I've also looked at casings that are floating around, and that is what I think closely matches what's happening right now with the hatch. You'll also see that I have a great big San Juan worm. Now I kind of consider this a stimulator, right? Sometimes they'll come up and look at the worm, sometimes they'll eat it, and then they'll go for the chironomid. So it is really nice to be able to use a larger fly on top as a dropper. It also helps it get down quicker and just gives a second option when it comes to fish choosing what they want to eat. And you'll notice here, I like using a wool indicator. I do have other indicators, the screw-on type, but when I'm stillwater fishing, I want it to land super soft. So I use these wool indicators. Now you'll notice here, I've got it about 2.5 feet above the first fly. So it's about 4 feet to the chironomid. And why I chose that depth has a lot to do with the depth of the lake You can kind of see here, well, maybe you can't, but the lake isn't super deep. So I am assuming, and both from experience and fishing this lake in the past, the fish are gonna kind of be midway through. It's about 8 feet deep where I'm fishing, so I believe they're gonna be eating kind of mid-column. So that's where I start. All right, it's now time to put the tutorial to the test. So, as I said, I've got the chironomid here. You can see I'm using a great big green snow cone, and I have got a San Juan worm, and my indicator is about 4 feet above that chironomid. So, fishing about 8 feet of water. See if I can get my line out. That's not frustrating at all. There we go. We are in business. It's gonna happen. I can feel it. So I have an area that I want to target. So I'm gonna kind of throw this away from the area I want to target because I don't want to splash the water too much. And that's just kind of my personal preference, right? I don't want to do too much here. Now there's a way to fish chironomids as well. All right, so now you can see my indicator out there, right? With my left hand, I'm gonna slowly finger roll this thing back and then stop. And what that does, it just gives a little bit of action to that chironomid, because sometimes they like to, it induces a bite, right? When they see that chironomid kind of slowly moving through the water. So I wait for it to sink and give it a minute. I'm watching it. You can see my indicator. Now I'm just gonna slowly finger roll it back. Slowly finger roll, and hopefully that thing's just gonna go down. There we go. Did you see that start to move? It just started to move, and I know there's a fish down below. So there you go. And now we're gonna see, did he take the worm? Yeah, he took the chironomid. There you go. I think it's probably a brook trout. Come on, buddy. Yes, nice brook. Beautiful little brook. Nice. All right, if he just calms down just for a second, you'll see that he's got it right in his nose. All right, she's unhooked. And just like that, you've successfully caught a nice brook trout chironomid fishing. Sweet. All right, guys, well, I hope that helps you the next time you get out stillwater fishing and you're either chironomid fishing for the first time or you've been doing it for a little while and just needed a couple of pointers. So that is how you effectively fish chironomids in stillwater. All right, everybody, hope that helped. Till the next time, fish on. In this video, I'm going to help you cast your fly rod just a little bit better. If you're just getting started with fly fishing or thinking about getting started with fly fishing and you're a little bit intimidated about the casting process, after you watch this video, I promise you, you're gonna cast a whole lot better, because we're gonna go over some basic things that if you apply and practice, you will cast that fly rod better than you are today. And be sure to stick to the end of the video, because I'm gonna give you a fly fishing tip that really makes a huge difference when casting a fly rod. So the first thing we wanna start with is a grip, right? There is a specific grip that you wanna use when casting a fly rod. You want to either use your thumb or your forefinger as leverage on the cork. You do not wanna hold the fly rod like a suitcase handle. I use my thumb. It's just a more comfortable and natural way to hold onto the fly rod. So that is the way that I choose to hold the fly rod, is putting my thumb on top of the cork. The next thing you want to do is you want to pull out the leader and a rod's length of fly line out the front of your rod. You want to have at least 9 feet of floating line from the tip of your rod when you start making the cast. A lot of new fly fishers will try to make that cast with either no floating line from the tip or just the leader. That is not enough to start building energy and speed to get that fly line to start flying out of the guide. So you want to have a full length of fly line from the tip of the rod. That's where you start. Now, if you're brand new to fly fishing, There is a mental discipline you have to have when you begin the cast. I like to teach anyone that's just starting a mental discipline of not allowing the rod to go back any further than 2 o'clock and no further forward than 10 o'clock. Now, as you start progressing with fly fishing, you will lengthen the arc of that cast based off of the distance. It gets shorter on shorter casts and longer on longer casts. But for the sake of somebody who's just started, you want to have a mental discipline of 10 to 2. And if you keep that mental discipline, then that rod is not going to go too far back on a back cast and too far forward. That really does influence the cast if your arc is too wide on a shorter cast. So in the beginning, start in your brain, no further back than 2, no further forward than 10, and you're gonna have a much better result. And when we start progressing in fly casting, we'll talk about how the arc of a rod will increase with distance. So that is a best practice if you're just starting out with fly fishing. The next thing you want to consider is creating a straight line path to the tip of your fly rod. Some new fly fishers have a tendency to snap their wrist, turn their wrist during the cast, which does not create a straight line path with the tip of the fly rod. If your fly line or if your rod tip is kind of arcing back and forth, your fly line is going to follow the path of your tip. So one thing you'll learn later on in fly casting, that you can influence where the line goes by adjusting where your rod is pointing at the end of the cast. So your fly line will follow the path of the tip of your rod. So when you're casting, look back at your rod tip to make sure that you're not turning in or turning out or snapping your wrist when you're going back on that back cast. So that's very important to create as best you can that straight line path. Next is your cadence. Think of a hand of a grandfather clock, right? You want to have a slight delay on the back of your cast and a slight delay when you bring it forward, right? It's not a matter of whipping it back and forth as fast as you can. You want to create a nice cadence when you are casting a fly rod. If you have the opportunity, you're out in the boat or in a float tube, or you have room behind you, a lot of people that I've casted, I just said, as soon as you're ready to bring it forward, wait a half a second longer and then bring it forward. A lot of new fly casters will try to whip it back and forth too quick and won't allow the line to fully extend out behind you before bringing it forward. And it's very important to start feeling that flow and having that very patient cadence. You do that and you're gonna find that the line will just start to generate speed. The rod is building up energy and transfers that energy into the fly line. But you have to have that cadence. Another thing I want you to consider, when you got the cadence down, you want to have a hard stop on the back and a hard stop in the front. That helps transfer the energy that the rod is creating into the line. So you cast back, hard stop. Cast forward, hard stop. That is a tip that you want to remember when casting a fly rod. Do that once you get the cadence down. Practice that hard stop in the back, hard stop in the front. Now you want to pull out a little more line. So if you're trying to shoot for maybe a 30 or 40 foot cast, you're going to want to have that line pulled from your reel and at the ready. Sometimes we use a stripping basket. Sometimes the line is just at our feet. But you want to be able to pull enough line out of your reel to be able to achieve that 30 or 40 foot cast. Pro tip, you saw that I was stretching the line out. Sometimes if line is stayed on the reel for long periods of time, this is not a large arbor reel, so it has a tendency, the line has a tendency to have a memory and stay curled. I do a little stretching of the line just prior to my first cast. So if that happens to you, that's pretty normal. Large arbor reels help mitigate that, but if you have a smaller arbor reel like I have here, stretching the line out before you start fishing or casting will help keep things from getting tangled. Another tip you want to consider when casting a fly rod, when you start that line you just pulled out of the reel, now you want to start allowing the line to carefully roll through the left or right hand, depending on how you're casting. So I'm a right-handed caster and I'm always controlling the line with my left hand. So even though I'm holding the line and I'm making sure there's no slack that's created from the reel all the way to the tip of the fly, that's super important. As soon as you get slack, that's when you get the whole spaghetti factory in front of your fly rod. So control the slack of your line and you're gonna have a much better result. Sorry for the wind. So as you can see, I'm casting right-handed. I've got the fly line loosely held in my left hand, but I'm not gonna allow any type of slack to be created when I'm casting. So I'm just kind of letting the line slowly travel through my hand without creating slack. And finally, the final cast, I drop the tip of my rod down and I'm ready to start fishing. Finally, and the big thing that you need to consider, fly line really does make all the difference. If you have a crappy, cheap fly line, you're gonna really struggle with casting your fly rod. Fly line makes a huge difference. You could have a good rod, a solid rod, an average reel, but with the right fly line, a good fly line, it'll make all the difference. And there's a lot of great fly lines out there. I prefer Rio. It's just a personal preference, but there are a lot of other manufacturers from Orvis to Cortland that make a great fly line. But spend the money on a fly line. It will make all the difference when casting a fly rod. All right. Well, I hope that helps you when you are out there casting. All right, so I hope those series of videos help you catch more fish the next time you're out there fly fishing. So let's talk about this special project. So I get a ton of questions and I don't always have the opportunity to answer those questions in the comments. Sometimes they even get lost in the comments and I don't see them for weeks or sometimes months. So a friend of mine were talking about this and we thought, why don't you do a series to where viewers, you, can ask me any questions you want, any question you want about fly fishing. So go to my website, FlyFishDan, and you'll see the contact information there. Contact me with your question, and your question may be part of this series. Any question that pertains to fly fishing, ask it on that contact page. We'll do a video together, and I will answer your question about fly fishing. So I appreciate you taking the time to ask me a question and being a part of this, so thank you. All right, everybody, well, thanks so much for joining me tonight. And hey, if you're looking for a new set of waders and you're kind of undecided, check out this review I did on drift waders. I think you're gonna find that this is the best wader for the price point out there, hands down. All right, everybody, till the next time, fish on.